Let's take you to IG in Melbourne, checking with Chris Weston. Chris, warm welcome to you. We kind of believed that risk might be on the table. Are you seeing signs of it this morning?
We're seeing very mixed trade here, Carson. Actually, to be honest, I think if you look at the client positioning at the moment, most of them are biased towards the short side on a lot of risk assets on euro, on Aussie dollar and S&P at the moment. I think that the sort of general bias has been for a bit of a short trade coming through. US markets at the moment look a little bit tired in my mind, and there does seem to be this clear diversion between what the actual economics are producing. If you look at the industrials, the Dow transports and the Dow industrials, there is this big divergence of a trade going through. So it's clear that these US markets are nicely being supported by the stimulus side of things. And I think also you can look at some of the AMG data that comes out of the US, and we're seeing the 8th week in a row now of AMG outflows of mutual funds ex-ETFs. So stock funds in the US are continuing to see outflows despite the US market pushing up to the highest level in quite some time. So I think there's still an unbelief amongst maybe the hedge fund community that this market deserves to be where it is right now. But I think what on open this morning, most of the news flow has been around Greece. Bit of a mixed reaction, really. I mean, you've seen Olli Rehn and Christine Lagarde both talking at different times, both giving a very similar message that the talks with Greece are progressing very well. And remember, they need to come up with this 12 billion in budget cuts to satisfy the Troika's demands. Otherwise, they're not going to get the 31 billion next tranche by November, and they will effectively be out of money. So this is perhaps a stumbling block for risk assets, and I think it's part of the reason why the euro has pulled back about 30 pips this morning. Probably one of the worst performing risk assets out there if you compare that to the Aussie, which is only down about 15 pips on open. There you can see the underperformance is coming out of Europe. Perhaps it's the fact that it was probably the best performing currency relative to the G10 relative to the greenback last week as well. And then you've seen all these different comments from the likes of Mr. Schaubles, Mr. Asmussen, just coming out really saying it's down to the Troika. The Troika are the ones who are going to come out. The ECB can't really do anything about this. We're not going to lower the interest component for Greece. We're not going to give them any kind of debt relief. That would be state funding. And as a result, I think Greece has really been the dominant news flow over the weekend. It's been a bit conflicting, to be honest, but yeah, I think risk assets generally are a little bit under the cosh this morning, but nothing too serious. I mean, Dow futures is down about 7 points or so.
Angela Merkel jets in. First time she's touched down on Greek soil since all this went pear-shaped. How much of a game changer will that be?
I don't think it's a game changer at all. I mean, I think she's very brave. I think she's very brave indeed. I think the Greeks, she's certainly not the favourite person in Greece right now, so she clearly can have a big security team with her. But I think this is a psychological situation for me, Carson, more than anything at all. I think she's obviously going to be talking clearly with Mr. Samaras, but it's more about their continued inclusion within the European Monetary Union. There has been some debate whether Greece will leave the European Monetary Union, and then she's been very vocal in them staying, and she's going to do everything that she can to stay. So I think this is her symbolic gesture that, despite the risks of me going to Greece, this is to silence the critics, and Greece will stay within the European Monetary Union. Of course, they need to identify those budget cuts, but she's been very vocal about them staying in. I think this is a symbolic gesture to the markets that she wants them to categorically stay within the European Monetary Union.
Is it likely to create headlines to move markets?
I don't think so. Well, I mean, I think if we look at how people are positioned at the moment, I think people aren't expecting a lot, both from the Eurogroup meeting, which comes out over the next couple of days, and they will be talking about Greece, they'll be talking about Spain, and they'll be talking about a number of other issues as well. No, I think the market. I think longer term, some people would say they would like to see Greece leave, but I think the market, the way it's been reacting, the market has been bid up as soon as we get some positive headlines around Greece. And I think these comments from Olli Rehn has been suggesting that the comments we are going to see over the next couple of days are going to be positive ones, which I think is giving some stabilisation to risk this morning as well. I don't see this being a market-moving event. Perhaps we are going to see some comments that Merkel wants Greece to stay in there, which could provide some confidence, but I don't think we're going to see this being a game changer, to be honest.
Because let's be honest about it, with no counter-cyclical policies in place, i.e. no will or ability of Greece's government to spend its way out of this, are they going to be locked in the kind of, well, hostage to all those B-grade officials you just flagged there, are they not? For nearly a decade, if not more. And that's the problem, that the people are going to endure, the pollies will walk away, leaving what?
Well, I mean, a lot of people, I think you're sort of going on the big argument that there have been in Greece's benefit for them to leave the European Monetary Union at some stage.
Well, at least if they have the lever of a currency to do something of their own accord and not simply be tied down, where you see it in Blythe, austerity doesn't equal growth.
No, it doesn't. But I think that the reason why sterling's held up quite well is because they do have their own independent currency, which they can devalue. And of course, gilts have been holding up very well. Hence why sterling's been trading quite strong, despite the growth prospects that are coming through in the UK with their PMI numbers and their services numbers, etc. But I think Greece are right. I mean, the austerity is strangling their economy, and you can make a pro and an anti argument for Greece to stay within the monetary union. They are in a situation where their growth will continue. They will continue missing their deficit targets going forward. They've only just recently missed their deficit targets, in the last couple of weeks. So, I think it's going to be very interesting to see how this goes longer term.
Right.
And Chris, just finally, you mentioned the Aussie briefly, so it's under a little bit of pressure, nothing too serious in terms of the risk appetite more broadly. What's the key focus for the Aussie as we actually kind of look for catalysts for it this week?
Well, I think the employment numbers this week are going to be very interesting as well, and how that feeds into the perception of a November cut. And the market's already pretty much pricing that in as a very strong possibility. Glenn Stevens has been speaking today, but I don't think we've actually learned a lot from that. So I think China's going to be really interesting as well. Now we can look at the Macau gaming revenues that have come through in September. They're up double-digit numbers. These feed into the idea that Chinese growth is stabilising. We've seen some of these early signs from some of the PMI numbers from China as well. So I think the employment numbers are going to be very important. I think some of the Fed speakers this week, there's a whole raft of them coming through in the US, are going to be very interesting as well. And that will obviously affect the US dollar side of the equation. But I think, and also what's going on in Europe as well. But I think technically speaking, taking off my fundamental hat, if we do get a close below that 101.67 level, and we've traded down to 101.50 this morning, if we get a close below that, and that's at 7 o'clock in the morning tomorrow morning, that's when the close comes through. Technically speaking, the target longer term would be around about 97 cents. So that's going to be interesting to see how that plays out.
Chris Weston, thank you very much. Appreciate your time today on Sky News Business. Thanks.
Cheers.
Well, up to 2/3 of Australia's 950 planned and current resource projects may not